Hello and welcome to Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure game books out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this time out we're playing Bloodbones, another of the new fighting fantasy books published by Wizard when they picked up the license for the series. Bloodbones is by Jonathan Green with art by Tony Hough, and it's a fantastic book to be added to the canon since it was originally slated to be released as part of the original run but got cancelled when the series went under. As far as I understand it, there were plans afoot to somewhat retool the fighting fantasy series before the decision was made to pull the plug. They were aware that the audience for the books was less the original target market of children and more young adults and adults who had grown up with the franchise. To try and bring in some new blood, they were going to do some books with less adult themes, cleaner mechanics, and a reduced section count of 300. Bloodbones was to have been the first book showcasing this new approach. When Wizard Books started releasing new titles for the series, Bloodbones was one that the fans showed strong interest in, so Green was able to revise his work and the book was released in 2006 with a full section count of 400. Now, Jonathan Green has become one of the pillars of the game book scene over the years, so it's tremendous to be playing another one of his fighting fantasy books. His books have a well-deserved reputation for difficulty, but at the same time, he's got a knack for turning in stuff that features interesting mechanics and fun twists on classic tropes. He holds the rare distinction of being a writer who managed to make a trip to the fantasy market to buy supplies actually enjoyable, so I have hopes for this book being a good time, even if it does kick my backside quite hard. Tony Hough is a great choice for an illustrator as well. He's worked on a few previous entries, including the demented spectral stalkers, and his heavily shaded but expressive work ought to be a good fit for a tale of spectral pirates. I'm particularly interested to see how Bloodbones shakes out because I wrote my own pirate-themed gamebook, Mutiny Most Merited, not so long ago. I'm not going to compare them for quality, that's not for me to say, but I will be looking out for things that I might have included or riffed on had I read this book before penning my own. If you'd like a copy of Mutiny Most Merited, then you can of course get one along with a bunch of other things I've written by going to patreon.com/HJDoom and pledging as little as £1 a month to support my nonsense. It keeps the bonus episodes coming and the whole podcast free of ads. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. The cover of Bloodbones I've got is quite similar to the last fighting fantasy book we covered, being mostly design stuff that relegates the actual artwork, a very nice picture of an undead pirate, to a small circle in the middle. Again, I'm slightly baffled as to why the artwork isn't given more prominence, especially when it's genuinely very good, but I dare say there were sound commercial reasons for the decision, and this seems to be a particular design of cover that they used for, I guess, second editions of some of their titles. I find it quite irritating, but it is what it is, and the pirate does look really nice. Let's take a look at the rules. We are broadly in classic fighting fantasy territory for this one. Skill, stamina and luck are all present and correct, and we get a very basic adventuring kit consisting of sword, lantern, tinderbox and backpack. We also get 2d6 plus 12 gold pieces, but we don't start with any provisions, which is slightly scary and sad for fans of tiresome running gags about Cornish pasties and lion bars. We are also told that we'll need to track time on our adventure as well. Regular listeners will know that I consider time tracking systems to be very tricky to get right, though that hasn't stopped me from including one in the gamebook I'm currently working on. There are two big issues. The first issue is that time tracking discourages exploration, which is the very thing you usually need to do in order to beat a gamebook. The second is that it's also very tricky to be consistent about when to add time to the running total. There are ways round both of these problems, but it'll have to overcome a degree of scepticism to land for me on this occasion, especially since the time elapsed is measured in hours, and I would say, in general, try and make your time units as vague as possible. You want a degree of elasticity in your time units, if you can manage it. Anyway, that is everything. I have generated my character, who I have decided to call Pugsmear Dillyglottal, because I think that sounds suitably nautical. They have a skill of 10, a stamina of 21, and a luck of 8. They also have a whopping 16 gold. With all the preliminaries out of the way, let's play Bloodbones. Background. It all started 10 years ago when the evil pirate Lord Cinnabar murdered your family. At the time, you were only 12 years old and lived with your family in the small fishing village of Clam Beach on the northern coast of Ruddlestone, halfway between two major ports of the kingdom, Harabnab, home to all lawful adventurers and sailors, and the sinister port of Crabs. Life in Clam Beach was not easy, but it did have a peaceful security about it. And then the terrible day came. At the moment, this is sort of sounding like an alternative origin story for SpongeBob SquarePants. And I don't mind that. That's a perfectly nice energy to have. It was a clear summer's day in Warming when the huge, forbidding black galleon sailed into the bay, flying the dreaded flag of the Skull and Crossbones. Pirates! The blood-thirsty cutthroats were soon racing up the beach towards the village. The fighting was swift and bloody. Soon, most of the menfolk of Clam Beach had been killed, your father and 2 brothers dying whilst trying to defend the village. In the end, the village elders had no choice but to surrender to the marauding raiders and open the village's meagre treasure coffers. The cruel pirate captain came ashore from his ship to collect the bounty himself. The sight of him filled you with awe and fear. The pirate was a tall, handsome man with a neatly trimmed, pointed black beard and his hair tied back in a ponytail. He was dressed in the clothes of a nobleman with a fine scarlet coat trimmed with gold braid and wearing a large tricorn hat. At his waist hung a gleaming cutlass, and you could not help noticing that the back of his right hand was tattooed with the image of a grinning black skull. I mean, it's a lot of description to establish that this man looks like a pirate, but I do appreciate taking the time to tell us exactly how much like a pirate he does in fact look. When the raiders had finally gone, filled with feelings of hatred for those who murdered your family, you asked Rhaegai, the village soothsayer, who the pirate captain was. "That villain is one of the most evil men ever to sail the 12 seas of Titan," was his vehement reply. "He is one of the most feared pirate lords of our age, a creature without remorse, a murderer, and a follower of the bloodthirsty voodoo death god Quezcari, whose mark is the Black Skull. His name is Cinnabar, but because of the terrible atrocities he commits, he is also known as Bloodbones." From that moment you vowed that one day you would have your revenge on the evil Cinnabar. Well, that's setting the stakes out quite nicely. I do prefer, as you may know if you're a regular listener, I do prefer the stories that have more of a personal sense of stakes. I'm often made slightly irritable by being dispatched by whichever posho is currently in charge of the kingdom on some mission where I will risk certain death so he or she can hang on to their throne. I like stuff like revenge. I can understand revenge. I can empathise with revenge. Your mother became ill soon after that dreadful day, and 3 years later she died. On your 16th birthday, you left Clam Beach and made your way to Harabnab, which is a fun word to say. You gained the position of a cabin boy on a ship travelling to the distant continent of Alanzia. So it is that for the last 6 years you have sailed all across the globe, but you never forgot the promise you made to yourself a decade ago. Over many voyages you have tried to learn as much as you can about the rogue captain. You discovered that Cinnabar's galleon, the Virago, is frequently seen sailing in the waters around Nankunu Bay, and that he has a hidden base somewhere close to the port of Crabs. You also gleaned as much information as you could about the notorious city, and so, when you decided that you were at last ready to confront your enemy, and the chance of passage on a merchant ship sailing to the port of Crabs came up, You leapt at the opportunity. Vengeance, you are sure, will soon be yours. And I suspect, going on previous form, that an early grave will soon be mine, but we will see how we go. The port of Crabs is haven to every pirate, buccaneer and freebooter who ply their trade off the coast of the kingdom of Ruddleston in the old world. As you stand in the prow of the merchantman looking towards the land, you can make out the ramshackle jumble of buildings of the infamous city, and the outline of the old fort that stands above it like some ancient, crumbling sentinel. The merchantman bumps against the stone jetty, and you quickly disembark. Not only is the port of Crabs one of the most dangerous cities in the old world, but a thick fog is starting to roll in from the sea. It is late afternoon on a chill day in unlocking. I do find it slightly wearing when fantasy writers feel the need to come up with names for months and seasons. Just say November. It's fine. It's not going to break anyone's immersion if you just use November. The docks are bustling with activity. Standing close to the quayside is a large old stone building, which looks like it could withstand a battering from Haidana, god of the deep himself. Hanging over its sturdy oak door is a faded sign declaring that this is the Jolly Roger. This seems as good a place as any to begin your search for Cinnabar, so you enter the inn. So we've had an old man, and we're having a pub. We are doing very well on the fighting fantasy tropes so far. I'm a bit sad that we're in the port of Crabs and not Port Blacksand, everyone's favourite fighting fantasy city, but I guess the author wanted a free hand to invent stuff without needing to necessarily build on what we already know of Port Blacksand, and that's entirely understandable. The spacious bar inside the Jolly Roger is packed with all manner of scurvy-looking sailors and other low-lifers. The landlord is as big as an ox, and he has a large anchor tattooed on one arm. No one takes any notice of you as you enter, so you approach the bar and order a tankard of ale. Deduct 1 gold piece from your adventure sheet. Gold now 15. You decide to question the landlord about Cinnabar first. Over your tankard of ale you talk about the weather and the state of trade, and then draw the innkeeper onto the subject of pirates. I hear the Virago plies these waters, you say. I'm surprised we weren't attacked ourselves. Not any more, he doesn't, the landlord replies. Have you not heard? Cinnabar has been dead these last 6 months. Cinnabar dead? You have come all this way after years of harbouring desires for revenge, only to find that the dread pirate lord has already passed from this world? You ask the landlord how he died. Have you not heard? I would have thought that everyone as far as the Diamond Isles would know by now. It all happened last hiding. You listen attentively as the innkeeper relates the tale. It appears that Cinnabar and his crew were emptying the hold of a galley sailing from Harabnab to Arkleton in distant Analand, when the renowned bounty hunter Conin caught up with them in his ship the Fortune. Unable to escape, Cinnabar and his men had to defend themselves against the crews of the galley and Conin. Fierce fighting ensued, with Cinnabar eventually falling at Conin's hand, having suffered an incredible number of wounds, his body being lost to the sea. With their leader killed, the surviving members of his crew fled aboard the Virago, returning to the port of Crabs. Soon after, Cinnabar's second-in-command, Mirel the Red, set off in the Virago amid terrible storms, purportedly to recover her captain's body. Many now believe that the pirate lord's galleon sank, as it's not been seen since, the landlord says, concluding his story. You thank him for his help, and in a bewildered daze you make to leave the inn. You console yourself with the thought that at least the murderer of your family has at last been brought to justice. As you leave the Jolly Roger, you feel someone pulling on your jerkin. Turning around, you discover that an old drunk slumped at a table by himself is the one trying to attract your attention. Just because he's dead don't mean he's at rest, mutters the drunk. Curious about the drunk's words, you sit down opposite the old man and ask him what he means. Let's just say you don't want to go believing everything you hear. But I know what's really going on. Oh, yeah, old Dreg knows. Cinnabar isn't really dead, see, and he's coming back, the old man says in a harsh whisper. Initially you press Dreg to tell you more, but he suddenly becomes serious and looks round the barroom uneasily. Not here. Meet me outside in 10 minutes. You nod in agreement and leave the Jolly Roger. Tendrils of fog are now swirling around the boats in the harbour and oozing along the streets of the town. When the 10 minutes are up, you quickly return to the Jolly Roger and sneak down a side alley next to it. In the mist and shadows at the end of a narrow alleyway, you can make out 3 figures standing over a 4th, cowering on the ground at their feet. Wasting no time, you draw your sword and dash towards them. Hearing your approach, the 3 pirates turn to face you. The burly characters are ugly, scarred rogues, and the biggest of them, who is easily wielding a heavy wooden club in one hand and holding a bullwhip in the other, looks as though he has some ogre blood in his lineage. At the pirate's feet lies Dreg, beaten, bruised, and only just conscious. Here's the snooper, growls the half-ogre. You're no match for us. By the time we finish with you, you'll be feeding the shrimps. Or rather, the shrimps will be feeding on you. The other 2 pirates burst into coarse laughter at their companion's joke. Yeah, you're fish bait. Now turn to paragraph 1. So, pretty good intro. Bit long, arguably, but nicely written, setting out the stakes of the adventure. The nice twist that Cinnabar is apparently dead is very cool, and now we're going to have to deal with some pirates, and there's a picture of the pirates, and it is really good. Really, really good. They're sort of wreathed in mist, and 2 of them standing in very sort of active poses, and the 3rd one, the half-ogre, looming behind them. Yeah, it's really good. Still laughing, the ruffians advance towards you. Apart from the half-ogre, there is a well-built bearded man, missing most of his teeth, and a leaner rogue with 2 ugly red scars running down the right-hand side of his face. And actually, yeah, all of those details have been really lovingly rendered in the artwork, which is nice. Now, do we want to try to escape, charge one of the pirates, or stand firm and prepare to fight the rogues? I've got a skill of 10. I'm pretty handy with the old sword. I think charging at the half-ogre and doing for him will probably scare the other 2 pirates off, so I'm going to charge one of the pirates. The pirates are not expecting this reaction from you, and you are able to wound one of the rogues before they know what is going on. Fight them both at the same time. So, it means I need to check the rules for fighting more than one opponent, see what they are this week. Okay, so this version of fighting more than one opponent, each adversary will make a separate attack on us, and we choose which one to fight, and we fight him as in a normal battle. Against additional opponents, we throw for your attack strength in the normal way, and if it's higher, then we just regard it as having parried an incoming blow. So effectively we're doing 2 separate fights at the same time, but only one of them can result in us damaging the opponent. Fine. Makes sense. Bit clunky. I think really you only need to roll for attack strength once. For yourself, I don't think you need to roll for the 2nd, 3rd and 4th opponents and so forth, but hey, it makes sense, and at least we know what we're doing. So, first pirate has a skill of 6 and a stamina of 5. The second has a skill of 6 and a stamina of 7. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated both pirates, and I took no damage. When you win, the half-ogre steps forward to fight you. When you face your opponent or try to escape, we will face the opponent, in for a penny, in for a pound. Dropping his whip, the half-ogre moves in to attack you with his club. It's an unusual battle tactic, is dropping one of your weapons, but hey, you do you, Mr. Half-ogre. If the half-ogre wins an attack round, roll 1 die, or roll 1 dice, they say. On a roll of 6, the blow from his club knocks you off your feet. This means that you spend the next round of combat getting up again, so you must reduce your attack strength by 2 points for that attack round. So, It's a cool little mechanic that's very, very unlikely to actually kick in, but I like that it's there. I'm a big fan of little low-frequency mechanics like this that give you a sense of this half-ogre with his gigantic club really dealing big, solid, meaty blows to the people he attacks. So, yeah, really, really cool little mechanic. I don't think it's going to crop up. He's got a skill of 8, stamina of 9. I should be able to defeat him pretty handily. Might get maybe one attack in, perhaps, over the course of the fight. We're going to find out almost immediately because I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the half-ogre. I was wildly overconfident in my own fighting skills. He managed to reduce me to 15 stamina over the course of the fight, but not once did he manage to knock me off my feet with his club, so that was something. Rather more bruising encounter than I might have hoped, but we have won. The last of the pirates falls, and with some relief you sheath your sword. It looks as if the pirates have beaten Dreg within an inch of his life, and he is failing fast. You do your best to make the old man comfortable, and he opens his eyes. "Thanks, stranger," he gasps, "but I'm a goner now. They're up to something, you know." You ask him what he's talking about. "Cinnabar's crew, the pirates of the Black Skull." Looking at the hands of Dreg's assailants, you see that each bears the tattoo of a grinning black skull. "I've seen them meeting up again around the taverns. Silas Gallows, Keelhaul Jack, old Crivens, even Marlou the witch doctor. They're planning something. Rumour says Myrrel the Red found Cinnabar's body, and he's not rightly dead. But he's not rightly alive either, see? It's all that voodoo and black magic they meddle in. Oh, not right. So it isn't." Dreg coughs weakly. "He's coming back. We're all doomed. Stranger, beware the Black Skull. Bloodbones is coming back." And then he is gone. Laying the old man down, you ponder his last words and what your next action should be. So Cinnabar is not really dead. In that case, you may still be revenged. But what did Dreg mean when he said that Cinnabar is not really alive either? Dreg has given you several clues about your enemy and where you should start your search for him. The old man mentioned that the pirates of the Black Skull were gathering again in the Port of Crabs, so they may have a hidden base somewhere in the city. But of course at present you have no idea where it might be. I just need to pause for a second to say that Silas Gallows, Keelhaul Jack, Crivens and Marley the Witch Doctor is some top-tier pirate naming. Okay, not quite as good as Pugsmere Dillyglottal, but those are some awesome, awesome pirate names. So's Myrrel the Red, to be fair. You now have several options open to you. You could visit some of the taverns and inns yourself in the hope of finding out more. You could visit the notorious gambling pits, a possible source of information and a way of increasing your gold pieces. Alternatively, it might be better to equip yourself at the market before you set out on your quest. Yeah, why not? Why not? I mean, to be fair, he has done a decent job of a market before. Or you could try and find out more about the Black Skull and the cult of Quezcari. Then again, you may do well to get the help of the authorities against Cinnabar. Although Governor Montago has certainly allowed the port to remain a safe haven for buccaneers and freebooters. Of course, you could abandon your search for further information and instead look for the pirates' hidden base. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 possible options. That is good writing there. They all feel plausible. They all feel sensible. I really do need some food. I need some provisions badly. So with a very heavy heart, I'm going to do the sensible thing and go to the market. The port's sprawling markets lie within the Merchant Quarter, which runs from Farthing Lane to Moneylenders Street. You have two possible options now. You can either look for practical equipment around the markets, or you can visit the Port of Crab's lively bazaar with its more exotic and expensive wares. I just want a cheese sandwich. I just want someone to sell me a cheese sandwich. So we'll go to the standard market. Scouring the various stalls, you soon find a number of items that might be of use to you on your quest. You may buy any of the things on the list as long as you have enough money. Deduct the correct number of gold pieces from your adventure sheet. So we have got rope, extra provisions, a cutlass. Ooh, cutlass is quite pricey at 8 gold pieces. A throwing dagger, a chainmail coat, a flask of grog, a poison antidote, or some gas globes. Now, the cutlass does not carry any bonuses. It's just another weapon. 8 gold for that seems a bit rich. You may use the throwing dagger against an opponent before a combat. Test your skill, and if you're successful, you may deduct 2 points from your opponent's stamina score, and if you win, you can reclaim the dagger. Chainmail coat reduces an opponent's attack strength by 1, but you must add 1 to the dice every time you test your skill. That is a clever bit of rules to represent the protection offered by a chainmail coat, but also the extra weight. The grog is very invigorating and will restore up to 4 stamina points, also for the duration of the next combat you are involved in. After drinking the grog, you may add 1 point to your attack strength, but only for that one battle. Poison antidote is effective against toxins and venoms of many kinds. There's enough for 3 uses, and the gas globes look like small glass spheres filled with a swirling mist. You may use a gas globe before going into battle. The globe simply has to be smashed on the ground in front of an enemy, who will then be enveloped by a sense-numbing cloud, which has the effect of reducing their attack strength by 2 points. It will not affect undead, demons or magical creatures. We've got 15 gold, so let's buy 5 provisions. No, let's buy 3 provisions and a flask of grog. That gets us down to 9. A poison antidote. That gets us down to 5. I think that's everything we need. I'm only buying the grog because I really loved the game Secret of Monkey Island when I was a wee lad. Let's go and see what the bazaar has to offer. I will say, as markets go, this was another one. At least everything on the list seems potentially useful. That's nice. We're not buying troll dolls or weird souvenirs or bits of wood and having to guess which of the various stupid items will turn out to be useful. They can all make a case for themselves. Most of them have got an in-game effect. Very nice. Yeah, better than average market experience. You are enticed towards the bazaar by its colourful stalls as well as the sounds and smells of far-off countries. You ignore the rolls of silk and the baskets of spices, but are attracted to a brightly decorated stall covered in a variety of unusual items. Talking with a vendor, you discover that the man is a talismonger, a trader in artifacts that are allegedly magical. However, by the look of some of the objects, you do wonder if they are really charged with esoteric power. The magical items the talismonger has on offer are listed below with their prices. You may buy as many of them as you want as long as you have enough gold pieces. So there's an ivory lion charm for 7 gold pieces, a shark's teeth bracelet for 5, a magical compass for 9, a potion of giant strength for 8, a lock of Elvin's hair for 6, and a carved darkwood armband for 4. So play a game. Which one of these will turn out to be absolutely vital for winning the quest? The only 2 I can afford are the shark's teeth bracelet and the carved darkwood armband. Of the 2, I will go for the carved darkwood armband, which will leave me with 1 gold remaining. The darkwood armband is carved to look like a snake with its tail in its mouth. Putting it on does not make you feel any different, at least not at the moment. Okay, well, we've made our purchases, and we've still got 1 gold to buy some booze if needed. If you bought the ivory lion charm, something happens. If not, you can look for more practical equipment around the market. We've already done that. Or leave to continue your quest. I will leave and continue my quest. I will also scarf down that cheese and pickle sandwich I was after and turn myself to 19 stamina points. Add 1 hour to your total. Seems fair. Probably takes about an hour to go and do the shopping. As you are walking along Traders Street away from the market, you cannot help but notice a roguish figure standing on the corner of Lobster Alley. The man is gaunt and scrawny in his later years and with several days' growth of stubble. He also has an eye patch, a wooden stump for a leg beneath his right knee, and wears a long coat and a tricorn hat. A monkey with its own tiny waistcoat is scampering around the man's shoulders in a manner I assume is adorable. As you walk past the pirate, you make eye contact and he beckons to you with a glance before turning and hobbling away up the alley. Do you want to follow the man or go on your way? Third old man of the game book so far. What is it about fighting fantasy and the elderly? It's a weird thing. Yeah, we'll follow him. When has an old man in a fighting fantasy game book ever steered us wrong? He also looks very piratey and may be able to provide us with some kind of clue. Despite having a wooden leg, the old rogue moves quite quickly and disappears around the corner before you can catch up with him. As you are about to round the corner yourself, you suddenly start having misgivings about your latest course of action. Will you continue to follow the pirate or go back the way you've just come? Look, I've committed to this course of action. Of course I'm going to continue. If I stopped doing things just because it was a terrible idea, I would never do anything. You turn the corner and find the old man standing in front of you. "So nice of you to join us," laughs the pirate. "As they say, old Crivens always gets his man." There is a sudden swishing sound and you receive a sharp blow to the back of your head. Instantly you lose consciousness. Well, we've found a member of Cinnabar's crew. That's good. He's lured us into an alley and had us bludgeoned unconscious. Less good, but I remain optimistic. You come to tied to a stone altar before a hideous bony likeness of the voodoo death god Quezcari. You only just have time to take in the fact that you are in a large underground chamber packed with pirates and devotees before a black-robed priest plunges his sacrificial knife into your heart. Your very blood will be used to help bring your enemy back to life. Your adventure is over. So, it didn't go very well. It went very badly, in fact. Very early death. Obviously, I'm going to invoke the sausagey finger bookmark rule. Far too soon to call a halt to proceedings. I was signposted. There's a bit of me that always resents being told that what I'm doing is clearly a bad idea and then just doubles down and carries on anyway. It doesn't speak particularly well of me, but it is a thing. I occasionally have small issues with being told what to do. It's a pretty good ending. I like the irony of setting out to get revenge on the dread pirate Cinnabar and instead offering him some medical attention. That's really cool. Not cool in the sense of I'm pleased with it, but cool as a bitter irony. I think we will decide that instead of following the pirate, we actually just went back the way we came, listening to the advice of the game book. You turn and come face to face with two black-robed figures, their faces hidden by the hoods of their habits. Wielding heavy koshes, the devotees advance on you. You will have to fight them both at the same time. So, we get a little bit of punishment for following the pirate into the obvious trap in the first place, but we are allowed a way out. This is actually something I've been trying to implement as a recurring mechanic in my current game book that I'm writing. The idea that bad decisions don't necessarily lead to an instant death, but they will make your life more difficult. Anyway, the first devotee has a skill of 7 and a stamina of 5. The second has a skill of 6 and a stamina of 6. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the devotees. They got a couple of lucky blows in on me and reduced me to 15 stamina points. I am going to celebrate my victory by scarfing down a strawberry pavlova and returning my stamina to 19. Starting to think I should have bought some more provisions, as my provisions are now down to 1. Your opponent slumps to the ground and you turn round to deal with the treacherous pirate. The old rogue is already fleeing as fast as he can along the alley. You run after him, cramming strawberry pavlova into my face, but hearing your approach, the man spins round and lets fly a dagger. Test your skill. There's a picture of old Crivens flinging the dagger at me at the end of an alley. It's really, really good. He looks absolutely terrified. The dagger is breaking the frame of the picture, as is the monkey, which is jumping about like a mad thing. Yeah, really, really nice bit of work. The alley's really nicely drawn as well. Tony Hough, very good at the old art. Let's test the old skill. Ooh, 10. I just passed. You duck just in time to avoid being hit by the dagger. You then close on the old pirate. The pirate unsheaths a long knife with which to defend himself. "You ain't taken old Crivens yet," he spits vehemently. "Come any closer and I'll slit your gizzard." Ignoring the old man's threats, once again you engage in battle. A lot of fighting in this one. Crivens has a skill of 8 and a stamina of 7. While you are fighting its master, the villain's pet monkey does its best to distract you, climbing all over you and biting you. As a result, for the duration of this battle, you must reduce your attack strength by 1 point, and every attack round roll 1 die, or dice. If the number rolled is even, you must lose 1 stamina point as the monkey has just bitten you. So, for all that I've got higher skill than Crivens, this is not a trivial fight, and I want to put him away rapidly. It might be worth trying to use a bit of luck on this one, I think. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated Crivens, and I didn't in the end use any luck on the basis that I was rolling really well in that fight. So I only lost 2 points of stamina, reducing my stamina to 17, and both of those came from being bitten by the monkey. But I am victorious. As Crivens' monkey scampers away, you make a quick search of the bodies of your assailants, each of which has the mark of the black skull on their right hand. The devotees carry no possessions, but the old pirate is a different case entirely. About his person, Crivens has a purse containing 6 gold pieces, and a very unusual coin indeed. So that's some handy gold. Almost twice the size of a gold piece, its face bears the image of a crab. It is a doubloon. Turning it over, you are surprised to discover that the other side has also been stamped with a picture of a crab. Doubloons have not been minted in the port of Crabs for 2 centuries, and as a consequence are rare and of great value. The coin you hold in your hands, however, is obviously a counterfeit, as it has 2 heads. It's the worst counterfeiting job I think I've ever seen. From this, you can only surmise that someone has been trying to mint their own doubloons, no doubt as a way to raise some money. You may also take Crivens' throwing dagger if you wish. You can use it in a fight against an opponent before you fight them, test your skill, etc, etc, etc. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. That's a handy thing. Dreg told you that Crivens was one of Cinnabar's old crew, so they obviously know that you are onto them. You will have to be careful not to attract their attentions further. Hurriedly, if somewhat cautiously, you set off again away from the markets. If you have the word Dnlsi, which is island backwards, written on your adventure sheet, something happens. And I don't, so I assume it doesn't. Choosing a location you haven't already visited, where do you want to go now in your search for information? Let's go to the notorious gambling pits. That is a classic fantasy city stock encounter. The gambling pits lie within the area of the city known as the Claws, the poorest and most dangerous part of the port. The pits themselves are housed in a vast stone building with a large iron-studded oak door. The entrance is flanked by 2 troll guards. As you walk past them and through the door, they give you a cursory glance, and one says roughly, "Remember, no fighting." Inside, the gambling pits lie under a thick cloud of pipeweed smoke and are packed with the unsavoury and roguish clientele you would expect. Mingling with the crowds, you check out the different games that are on offer. After a brief look round, you discover 3 that interest you. Which will you investigate further? The Arrow of Providence, Calabrius's Calculator, or the Amazing Armano? Of those, Calabrius's Calculator sounds like it might have some modicum of skill to it, so let's go for that one. Calabrius's Calculator is a large mechanical contraption made up of countless cogs, levers and crankshafts. The main feature of the machine, however, is a large panel with 5 windows on it, behind which are 5 drums with numbers embossed on them. Standing next to the calculating device is its operator, a wizardly-looking man who you assume is Calabrius. Step up! Who will accept the challenge of Calabrius's calculator? Only 2 gold pieces, and you could win 10, the man calls out. You imagine that this challenge involves solving some kind of puzzle generated by the machine. Puzzle be still my beating indifference. Do we want to accept the challenge? I think we do. "Ah, a contestant," Calabrius exclaims. "Come forward, don't be shy. Now where's your money?" We hand over 2 gold, leaving us with 5. And Calabrius moves to the side of the huge calculating machine and pulls a lever. There's a lot of noisy clanking and the number of drums spin round at great speed. Gradually, one by one, they come to a stop behind their windows, the last one revealing itself to be blank so that the panel looks like this. 1, 9, 25, 57. The calculator has devised its cunning conundrum. This machine can baffle even the greatest minds in Riddleston. Can you work out what the next number in the sequence should be? If you can, turn to the paragraph with the same number as the answer. So, let's have a think. Okay, it's relatively straightforward. So you've got 1, 9, 25 and 57. The difference between 1 and 9 is 8. The difference between 9 and 25 is 16. And the difference between 57 and 25 is 32. So you simply need to add 64 to 57 to get to the next number, which is 121. That is correct. Congratulations, says Calabrius with a forced smile and reluctantly hands you a bag containing 10 gold pieces. Add these to your adventure sheet and regain 1 luck point. So we're doing quite well. Should have come here first. Could have got loads of money for the market. So we're now up to 15 gold. That's pretty impressive. With your confidence having been granted a boost, will you now look at the Arrow of Providence or visit the Amazing Armano? I want to visit the Amazing Armano and find out what's so amazing about him. Oh, there's an option to leave the gambling pits as well, but we're certainly not going to take that. That's the coward's way out. So yeah, we'll do the Amazing Armano. Beneath a brightly painted banner bearing his name sits the Amazing Armano. The man has the look of a Lendellander about him, with sallow skin, slanting eyes and a long thin moustache. He is performing a trick with 3 playing cards and has attracted a small crowd of curious onlookers. 2 of the cards are black, 1 is white, and the aim of the game seems to be to guess which of the cards is the white one when they have been shuffled and laid face down on the small table in front of the man. To play the game, you have to place a stake of 2 gold pieces to win a potential prize of 10 gold pieces, although at the moment no one seems to be having much luck against Armano. I think we will leave that. That is a Find the Lady scam, one of the most old school gambling scams. He is moving the white card with sleight of hand to avoid having to pay out much in the way of winnings. And as a random aside, I genuinely once saw someone running the Find the Lady scam on the streets of Northampton, and somehow he was getting punters, even though it's arguably the best-known gambling scam in the entire world. So, it was nice to see someone doing an old-fashioned grift like that in a weird sort of way. But yeah, we're not playing Find the Lady with the Amazing Armano. I can't decide whether Amazing Armano is a better name, in that it's drawing attention to the fact that he's clearly got some skills at sleight of hand, or whether it's a worse name than something like Honest Steve's Definitely Not Crooked Gambling Emporium. Anyway, we'll have a look at the Arrow of Providence instead. The Arrow of Providence is a popular game of chance in the gambling pits. It is made up of a large circular board divided into 12 sections, each painted with a legend. An arrow-like pointer has been attached to the centre of the board so that it can be spun. So that's just a big spin the wheel thing. To play, the game will cost 2 gold pieces, but you will be playing for a potential jackpot of 10 gold pieces. I think we'll leave this one alone as well. It seems like long odds to me, even assuming it's not crooked. Test your luck. So we've got a luck of 8, 5, that is less than 8. As you elbow your way through the bustling crowds, above the hubbub you hear a gruff voice say in a harsh whisper, "The Virago sails for Bone Island at midnight." Looking round, you see 2 knavish-looking characters part company and go their separate ways among the throng. You will not be able to follow them now. The Virago was the name of Cinnabar's ship, and what was that about an island? This careless talk could be an important clue. Write down the word Dnulsi, island backwards, on your adventure sheet. So we've got first keyword, that's helpful, and we can now leave the gambling pits. And we've got somewhere we might be heading to as well. Pushing through the bustling hordes of gamblers, you suddenly feel something pushed into your hand. Quickly looking around you, you think you see an old woman hurrying away, but she is soon lost in the crowds. Ah well, an old woman. What an amazingly different person to run into. Makes a change from the old men, I guess. You have been given a sealed envelope. You wait until you are outside before breaking the wax seal and opening the envelope. Inside are a letter and an iron key. The letter reads as follows. If you are determined to defeat the pirates of the Black Skull, go to room 101 of the Silent Donkey. A friend. The key must be the one to the room in the inn. Do you want to follow up this contact? Turn to the paragraph with the same number as the room, but for now add 2 hours to your total. So now 3 hours. I think we'll go to the room 101. Nothing bad has ever been in a room 101. Nicest rooms in the hotel usually, room 101. The Silent Donkey is situated on a dingy back street within the claws. Several suspicious-looking characters watch you enter the inn, but none try to stop you. Creeping up the creaky wooden staircase, you come to the first room on the first floor, room 101. The key turns in the lock, and opening the door, you step into a room furnished with only a table and a chair. But what you see there sends an icy chill down your spine. On the table rests a human skull, painted black and decorated with a headdress of brightly coloured bird's feathers. The Black Skull. This is a bad omen. There is nobody here, so this must have been all a set-up by Cinnabar's cronies to delay you. The skull fills you with foreboding, but it still intrigues you. Do you want to take it with you or not? No, I don't want to take the Black Skull with me. It's a hideous knick-knack. I will leave it exactly where it is. It could not be more cursed. You have wasted enough time here already, so you prepare to leave the Silent Donkey. Test your luck. There's going to be a little ambush. 7. Lucky just. We're now into the more likely to be unlucky than likely to be lucky arena, since my luck is now 6. With your fingers around the handle of the door, you freeze, hearing a floorboard creak outside the room. Is there somebody there? Somebody up to no good? Silently, you unsheath your sword just in case, and open the door, but do not step through it. Instantly, 2 black-robed figures leap into the doorway, koshes raised. Determined to stop you succeeding in your quest, the devotees of Quezzicari attack. In the narrow doorway, you can fight these acolytes of evil one at a time. First devotee has a skill of 6 and a stamina of 7. Second devotee a skill of 6 and a stamina of 6. And I guess if we'd been unlucky, we'd have had to fight them both at the same time. So, yeah, another clever little bit of mechanical ingenuity there. I like that. It should be a fairly straightforward fight, though. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the devotees, and they reduce me to 15 stamina points. If you win, a rapid search of the fanatics' bodies reveals nothing of value to you, so you quickly leave the inn. Add 1 hour and the word Yeknod, or donkey backwards, to your character sheet. Time now 4. So far, the time mechanic seems to have been really well implemented. I'm really impressed. Feels consistent. Night has already fallen by the time you start to look for the pirates' hidden base. At least that should make your activities more covert and less conspicuous. If you have reason to go to Mandrake's Lane, now is the time to do so. If not, where will you look first for the pirates? Around the docks? At the ruined lighthouse on the promontory to the southeast of the port? In the sewers beneath the port? In the taverns and inns of the city? At the cemetery outside the city walls? Or in the temple quarter? I don't have any clues about where they might be hiding, so this is kind of just a lucky dip. I mean, they're religious zealots who worship an evil voodoo god. Maybe there's the temple of the evil voodoo god in the temple quarter. Let's start there. An eerie silence pervades the streets of the temple quarter, creating a disconcerting atmosphere. Creeping cat-like along the roads, you are suddenly surprised by two figures that step out of the shadows in front of you. Dressed in black habits and with sacrificial daggers raised, the devotees advance towards you. Drawing your sword, you prepare to do battle. Fight them both at the same time, and we need to track how long the battle takes. If it lasts longer than 10 attack rounds, something's going to happen. So, the first devotee is a skill of 6 and the stamina is 6. Second devotee is a skill of 7 and the stamina is 6. I'd be amazed if this lasts longer than 10 attack rounds. But we will find out. We will find out. Because I'm going to roll some dice. Imagine my surprise when the battle goes on for longer than 10 attack rounds. After 10 attack rounds, I have been reduced to 7 stamina, and I have killed one devotee and reduced the second devotee, the one with a skill of 6, to 2 stamina points remaining. That close to finishing the battle. But it turns out you can go on for longer than 10 attack rounds if you forget how to roll dice. As you are fighting several other devotees round a corner, and it is not long before you are restrained, there is a sudden sharp blow to the back of your head, and you black out. Ah dear, I think we know what happens next. Oh yeah, we come to tied to a stone altar before a hideous bony likeness of the voodoo death god Quezcari. And we get stabbed, and our adventure is over. And I guess our adventure is over at this point. Seems a reasonable juncture to call a halt. I'm really enjoying this. I think what I'm enjoying most about it is that it's got that thing I love, which is the feeling of familiarity and the feeling of innovation. So it's lots of things I recognise, but at the same time they've been done in subtly different and fun ways. It's just good old-fashioned fantasy pirate nonsense done extremely well at this early stage. I may find that I become a little frustrated with it if it's as hard as some of Jonathan Green's early books are, but I love just pootling around a fantasy city, getting into scrapes. This is absolutely giving me that in spades at the moment. I really like the bit where you can come across various members of Cinnabar's crew. That feels fantastic. I really, really like that. And the whole mystery of where the pirates are based and where they're going to go is also really cool. It makes me want to go back and play again to find out where those dastardly pirates are and have a go at finding them. So, yeah, as a recorded playthrough goes, I had a lovely, lovely time with that, and I'm really looking forward to digging into it over the next few hours as I try and beat it and learn its secrets. So I'm going to go away and do that. I'll be back for you in just a few moments with some closing remarks. Tatty bye. I felt pretty happy with Bloodbones when I ended the recording, and I'm pleased to say that those warm feelings did not dissipate as I continued to play through the book. There's a few minor annoyances, but overall I'd say this is one of the strongest entries in the series for a good long time. It's nicely written, it's got great art, the design is good for the most part, and it has a lovely structure. I think I'll get my gripes out of the way first because I want to finish on the good stuff which heavily outweighs the bad. So, there's some issues with difficulty in this book for sure. The fights get really tough towards the end, and there's an awful lot of combat scattered throughout the book, which means that unless you have a very high skill, you are going to be struggling to get through. There's also a fair number of places where a failed luck test or a failed skill test leads to an immediate death. Now, I don't have a massive problem with any of this. It creates an atmosphere of danger, it makes the limited mechanics of a classic fighting fantasy book feel impactful, and you can easily cheat your way past it if it starts to feel oppressive. Given the kind of stats you need to beat this book, it's fairly unlikely you'll die that often to the various lethal traps and tricks scattered through the book, and I like that they are there. I actually quite enjoy a sudden and random death from time to time. It keeps the stakes nice and high, and given that you're going to need a skill of 11 or 12 and a similar luck, these really aren't going to be a significant problem for most playthroughs. I'm less of a fan of the fact that there are elements necessary to advance the plot gated behind luck tests. Fail a luck test in the gambling pits, for example, and you'll wind up not getting a crucial clue about Bone Island, and that somehow feels much more frustrating to me than falling to my death or being drowned by an octopus. Technically, the exact same thing is happening. You're being prevented from finishing the book by the vagaries of random chance, but for some reason, not giving me something I need feels worse than just cutting my head off apropos of nothing. There's also a few small errors in the book. It's possible to end up in a fail state in Port of Crabs where you've explored every area but not found the things you need to progress, and the book doesn't tell you that you're screwed. You're going to have to work that out for yourself, which doesn't feel ideal. Also, the bit where you go to the room in the inn called the Donkey and get attacked by evil cultists and there's a big evil skull, that should probably only be accessible after night has already fallen, since it allows you to skip a big chunk of content if you get it early, and it would be very weird if you'd only visited one place and suddenly night's immediately fallen and you're onto the second hub. Which brings us to time, which is a mechanical element that doesn't quite land for me, and in terms of pure functionality, it's actually solid. It feels like everything you do is costing a reasonable amount of time, and the mechanic is limited to the first portion of the gamebook where you're exploring Port of Crabs. It's one of the better time mechanics I've seen implemented in a gamebook, to be fair. I just don't like the way the mechanic pushes you to avoid exploring. It creates an unpalatable tension between what you want to do and the means by which you're going to do it. I don't like feeling bad when I explore an area and it turns out not to be necessary. That said, I do acknowledge that there's some pleasure in working out the optimal path through the time-bound sections of the book that fits in a few of the more useful optional areas along the way. I feel like there might have been a method of getting to the same point that felt a bit more pleasant to engage with, but this is still ultimately a well-realised bit of time mechanics that does lend a certain sense of urgency to the opening portion of the narrative. So even though I'm criticising it, I'm not criticising it that harshly. It's basically fine. The last thing I'm going to float as a negative is that there's some depictions of other cultures in this that maybe aren't the most subtle or nuanced. There's a voodoo theme in this book, and it's always hard to present that sort of thing in a culturally sensitive fashion, particularly within the scope of an adventure gamebook aimed at 11-year-olds. To his credit, Green does make a point of noting that the indigenous inhabitants of Bone Island are not primitive in the slightest, but it's hard to avoid a sense that there's some exoticisation of the characters who don't fit into the standard Western European model of society. I think this can be tough to avoid. I've certainly enjoyed many a culturally appropriative depiction of voodoo zombies over the years. I am far from perfect in these matters, but it is something that needs to be flagged. And again, I don't want to overplay it as an issue. I think the author is doing his best, and I've certainly seen many worse examples than this, but it does still rankle slightly in 2025. Those are all of the substantive criticisms I've got, and absolutely none of them is any kind of deal breaker. It's mostly good things that could have been better, and that's ideal. I get to do the much more fun thing now of pointing out how awesome Bloodbones is and why you should definitely play it. Part of what makes this book so engaging for me is the really nice structure. You start off getting into all sorts of trouble in Port of Crabs before taking a sea voyage to Bone Island and getting shipwrecked. Then it's off to explore Bone Island itself before heading into a little mini dungeon for the finale. Everything feels well developed, but nothing outstays its welcome. You get a really good sense of escalation from the structure, and it gives it a structure that feels more like a real story than a lot of gamebooks manage. I think this balance between game and narrative is very hard to get right, but Bloodbones is absolutely in the sweet spot for me. As is often the way, I found the dungeon at the end to be the least interesting part of the story. It's by no means a bad example of the form, but it is quite linear, and though the encounters are good, they don't have the spark of earlier sections. There is a nice recurring zombie motif that makes this area feel distinctive, and also appropriately like the home of some followers of an evil voodoo god. You can find a vampire pirate as well, who feels like he was included out of a sense of obligation more than anything else, but it is a fun little encounter. There's a somewhat irritating puzzle to solve, which did mildly annoy me. It takes forever even once you know the secret, and I feel like there might have been a way to make it easier to decode with a little work, but it does also make use of the artwork, which I always enjoy, and there's only a couple of puzzles in this book, which feels fine. It is a solid little dungeon, but I don't think it's much more than that. This contrasts with the opening in Port of Crabs, which is fantastic. Some of this is my own personal bias, but I found the range of different things to do in Port of Crabs really appealing, and it struck a good balance between the familiar and the novel. There's nothing much in here that hasn't been done before, but rarely have the stock fantasy city cliches been handled this well or this imaginatively. I always enjoy seeing writers come up with weird new gambling games, for example, and Green delivers a fun twist with the mechanical brain teaser machine and an appropriately elaborate spin the wheel game on top of the more familiar Find the Lady scam. The journey to Bone Island is also very nice, albeit fairly short. Stowing away on a pirate galleon was always going to feel good. Sooner or later you are going overboard, and there's a brilliant instant death whereby you drown if you didn't stop some wreckers at Port of Crabs who are engaged in luring a ship to its death on the rocks. Kill the wreckers and that same ship will be available to pick you up and save you from a watery grave. That is awesome. Green also manages to fit in a ghost ship on the trip, which is such a classic bit of seafaring lore, and he comes up with a way to tie it into the overall plot in a neat fashion, and that compensates for Cinnabar himself not leading a crew of zombies like in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Throughout the book, Green shows a deft hand at mingling cliché with surprise. That's fully on display with the Bone Island portion of the book, which draws on adventure fiction tropes, but also finds time to mix in a version of Caliban from The Tempest, which I found a very pleasant surprise. There's also lots of insects of unusual size to have a go at, which makes the poison antidote a pretty sensible buy if you're planning to blunder around Bone Island at random. There's also a superb little bit of design just tucked away as kind of an Easter egg for the observant. You get a map of Bone Island complete with an attractive illustration at an earlier stage of the adventure, which you will need to find Bone Island. There's a specific point once you land on the island where it makes sense to look at the map again, and the section you get sent to is also on the facing page to the illustration, meaning that you don't have to rummage through the book to find the picture to get the lay of the land. It just gets handed to you at exactly the point where I was thinking I should look up the map. That's such a clever, user-friendly bit of design, I had to call it out. At the same time as every section of the book having its own unique vibe, there's also a bunch of repeated motifs that crop up throughout the book to remind you that you are dealing with a particular bad guy with a particular vibe. You get to run into Cinnabar as an undead pirate at the end of the first section, which gives that element a real lift, and throughout the book you'll be tangling with various members of his crew, as well as a seemingly endless army of crazed voodoo cultists. I've often said that the standard structure of the fighting fantasy book has a tendency to make the villain into a remote figure, a consequence of the way a standard D&D dungeon traditionally worked back in the day. I really like those books that manage to make the final boss feel present throughout the story, and Bloodbones' approach is a textbook example of how to do that. Getting to meet him midway through, hide on board his galleon, that makes him feel more like a character, but it's the clever way his minions are deployed that really impresses me. Lieutenants are a great way to give a flavour of the final boss through their underlings. We saw that recently with Seven Serpents in the sorcery books, where the magic serpents actually wound up being more impressive than their actual master, the Archmage of Mampang, but that is beside the point. Finding the different members of Cinnabar's crew and then stabbing them in the face felt consistently good. A small measure of revenge by proxy on the undead captain himself each time I took one out. Some of them have nice little mechanics associated with them, but even when there's simply a name and a description, I felt a little rush of pleasure when I happened across them. They are a proper motley collection as well. There's Silas Gallows, still wearing the noose from when they tried to hang him. There's a fella who tries to brain you with an anchor on a chain. That's really cool. There's the huge figure of Bloodarak the cook, who has a taste for human flesh, and the sadistic Dr. Malefact, the ship's surgeon who revels in torture. They all feel extremely characterful. They all feel like proper pirates, and they are an absolute highlight of the book for me. In terms of items, there's about 35 items you can find in the course of this book, of which I think 7 or maybe 8 are strictly required in order to win, and there's a handful of other items that are extremely handy in certain situations. There's not much cursed stuff in here either. Most things are either neutral or useful, with only, I think, 2 maybe actually having a detrimental effect on you. There's a lot of tat to find, but much like the last fighting fantasy book, The Eye of the Dragon, the linear design makes exploration and finding stuff feel quite manageable. Although the design is linear, the fact that you get so much agency in terms of how you approach each area hides it well. Port of Crabs is essentially a pair of small hubs that you can go through however you want, and it feels very open, even though there's not actually that much choice in how you go through the area. The island feels more like a classic game book, in that it's the area where you get the most geographic freedom. It's quite easy to miss important points here and take different paths across the island, but at the same time, it's not a huge place, and exploring never felt onerous to me, even though I knew there was going to be a specific path I needed to find. The journey to Bone Island itself and the final dungeon are more strictly linear, but in the latter case, I prefer linear dungeons if they aren't too long, since I find exploring underground areas with no landmarks a bit of a chore. The finale feels fairly epic as you get a showdown with both Cinnabar and his demonic patron to go out on. It's ultimately a series of fights. Cinnabar has a parrot that gets all up in your business, but it's basically the same mechanic as we saw with Crivens and his little monkey, so that doesn't feel particularly special. You'll need a particular item to finish him off, but you'll definitely have come across the item on your travels, and if you don't pick it up, honestly, that's on you. Quezkari the demon is another tough fight, but you can make it easier if you've got the right gear. You're going to need a special weapon and a specific bit of information about that weapon in order to hurt the demon, and if you don't have the means of making Quezkari weaker, you're looking at a skill 13, stamina 18 fight. You can get it down to skill 10, and there's a couple of options for boosting your own attack power in the fight as well, so I think in the best case scenario, you can knock the demon down to an effective skill of about 8, which, given that you will have needed a skill of 11 or higher to get to that point, turns it into a bit of a cakewalk. I like this approach because making the final boss weaker always feels like a real win. It would have been nice to have some kind of little special rule for the fight to make it feel really unique, but it's perfectly functional and it's an adequate climax to the story. It just feels like it's 1 or 2 little twists short of being elevated into something really special. In many ways, the scariest fight is actually the boss of the mini-dungeon, Ramatu, the Lord of Zombies, who has revived Cinnabar. If you don't manage to break his magical power on your travels through the dungeon, he's a bit of a beast with a skill of 11 and a stamina of 11, who casts a different and horribly impactful spell on each of the first 4 rounds of combat. These are brutal attacks that either deal additional damage or drain your stats, and they feel just incredibly harsh, but in a good way. Even if you get through the fight, it makes you want to find a way to turn off his magical power on a subsequent playthrough because the effects of his spells are so devastating. I suspect not wanting to repeat himself in the very final encounter may have played a role in organising the fight with Quezkari in the way that he does. I do need to shout out the artwork as well. This is probably Tony Hough's best work. He's always been good, but this is a step up from his previous work. Again, some of my biases are probably showing through in that I have a preference for what you might call classic illustration, where there's a lot of detail, a lot of shading, and the frames tend to be quite busy. I like things to be stylised, but preferably in a way that doesn't remind me of comic book art, which I think of as a different discipline. I love comics, I love manga. When I'm playing a game book, I want to feel as though I'm looking at classic illustrations. I want them to have that more painterly quality, I guess you could say. I mean, there are plenty of comic books out there where the artwork is fully painted, to be fair, but they are outliers. This is hitting almost everything I really like in book illustrations, and the choice of what to illustrate is also very strong. There's no empty rooms with a chest in the middle bulking out the work here. Hough has drawn all of the things you really want to see. Ghost pirates, zombies with weird masks, massive sea monsters, galleons, 2 different versions of Cinnabar, all of the boss fights, plus an anthropomorphic chameleon riding a massive but less anthropomorphic chameleon. Chameleon on top of chameleon, pure genius. And it all looks lovely for me. Overall, I think this is an incredibly strong entry in the series. It's a better rendition of pirate nonsense than Seas of Blood, and weaves together the pirate tropes with more old-school fantasy gaming tropes in a way that lands extremely well for me. It is tough as nails, but in a way that you can engage with as much or as little as you like for the most part. It is stuffed with really appealing characters and set pieces, and the structure allows the book to tell more of a story than most game books manage. It's a book that can stand alongside the very best of the later entries in the canon, and in a way I'm glad we didn't get it at the time it was supposed to be released. It's much nicer to have it as a full 400 paragraph experience, albeit rather later than originally advertised. It's a tremendous showcase for Jonathan Green's talents, and I'm really pleased to note he'll be returning for several more books in the near future. That is all for this episode. My thanks to James Druitt for providing the copy of Bloodbones I used for this episode. It is much appreciated. Next time we're going to be doing a steampunk-inspired gamebook suggested by a listener, so I hope very much you will join me for that. If you want to get in touch with me in the meantime, you can do so by emailing me at hjdoomretrofun, all one word, at gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky at hjdoom. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving a rating or a short review on your podcast provider of choice. It would really help me out. Don't forget, I'm still watching a whole bunch of horrible cheap movies and talking about them over on Popular Antiquarian as well. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.